that somebody might have said, I have 10 hours, but by the way, I want to be at this place at this point of time, this other place at this point of time. And since people are actually helping in coming up with a plan, they might be missing some of these constraints. And so we have a machine agent, in this case, an automated planner, working with the humans to try and figure out what they might use. So that's an interesting kind of a project. That's sort of, by the way, this is humans basically doing planning. So this is artificial intelligence. Because somebody comes to this system and says, help me do a plan, and on the other side are this crowd of people. So as far as you're concerned, it's just a machine. Okay? And this is artificial intelligence for artificial intelligence. Okay, so exception. Okay, and then, so the point is that the same issues that we talked about can also be handled in these TV kinds of scenarios. The last thing I want to tell you, which is quite different, is imagine you have a whole bunch of data nowadays about public events, right? And so here's like a presidential debate, and then as people are talking, previously people used to talk about what's going on in the world, but that was never recorded. But now, thanks to Twitter and various other social media, it's all recorded for you. So the question is, there are these newspapers, a lot of times journalism involves essentially saying, this is what people on the Twitter said about what Obama said. So news analysis essentially means reading Twitter and writing it down. In fact, I think you can actually see Twitter feed directly, accepted these days, right? So the question, of course, is, since as computer scientists and AI people, we are always interested in getting people out of jobs, we want to see whether we can remove this aspect. Can we automate this? And to automate this, for example, so you may have like a transcript of the talk, and you have all these tweets with timestamps, and I want to be able to automatically align them. Automatically segment the transcript and align which part of the segment corresponds to which tweets. This is a pretty hard problem, but once I do that, then I can also, so it turns out that there are some background on actually generative models and graphical models that you can use to do that problem. Once I do that, I will be able to, for example, figure out that there was some place where maybe the big bird thing happened. There was a large amount of backlash, for example. Okay, so something that can be automatically done. And furthermore, you can actually automatically evaluate the sentiments of pieces of this debate. Okay, so this is another thing. Now, I did not know, would you say that this and robot are both AI? I'm hoping that you will say so by the end of this talk, because all of this essentially, you are essentially able to, in this particular case, analyze the signals and figuring out patterns. Okay, that's one other thing, and there's some things behind that. So I'm going to end now. So on summary, basically, we talked about what AI is, some successes, and hopefully trying to, I hope you got something about what might be involved in doing AI. And then I said something about projects in my lab. If you want additional resources, there is a AI topics web page. Again, I'll make these slides available. AI topics web page that AI maintains. It has a whole bunch of information about the current news topics. One more of the general lectures of this kind that I have given earlier was my last lecture. As you saw, its name is, you can't do that, Dave. Dave is, who's Dave? If any of you have seen 2001 Space Odyssey, any of you actually figured out what the music was in the beginning? Okay. So that is Thus Spake Zarathustra, which was actually used in 2001 Space Odyssey. And how the computer actually stands for heuristic algorithmic. Okay, and this talk was what can you learn in your normal life about designing these kinds of programs. You might want to see that. And if you have nothing else to do, you can see my entire Intro to AI course that's available on the YouTube. And then that also gives you an idea of what is involved actually in doing this. I just try to do the entire course with your honor students. I try to do it in 1 hour, but you might need more. Okay, so you can do that. So that's where I'm going to actually end. I do have questions that were submitted. I'm going to look a little about that, but I would completely understand if you have classes to go to, start walking, but I will just go through these questions since I've been sent those. Okay. I'm sure you may have other questions that you can ask me too. I do have parking until 2:15, but I'm sure you have classes. One question that somebody asked is what policies, if any, are being done in trying to stop these robots from taking over? I mean, that's like passages included, but essentially, since we are developing these machines that are essentially going to be much more ubiquitously present in our in our lives, should there be policies? Should there be laws? Of course, there is. All I can say is there's a lot of interest, both professionally and in lay public. Of course, this lay public, these are articles from, I just picked one from Slate and one from some other place about what's going to happen when robots take over your jobs, what's going to happen when a Google car hits a Microsoft car, for example. Is Sergey Brin going to pay to Satya Nadella, who's going to run this thing right now? But so the questions, all I can say is that all of us are interested in talking about it. Obviously, scientists are particularly, technologists and scientists are particularly, they can be easily criticized for making the machine fast and then figuring out what happens. We did that for atom bombs, and we're going to do this for robots who will take over our lives. But since we learned something about atom bombs, there is some interest in thinking about this. Right now, there are no obvious answers. Obviously, Google got Nevada to certify the cars, Google car. I don't know what heck Nevada was thinking in allowing these cars to drive on the roads. Okay, so already there is some laws being made. It's a very tough question. I wouldn't say that we talk about this in the normal technical introduction to AI, but it's a very important question. In fact, a very interesting paper that was once published in International Joint Conference on AI, there is this guy from law school who wrote this following thing. You do know that Google Mail reads your mail, right? Sergey Brin is not reading, but Google Mail reads your mail. Because you know why? When you're reading the mail, they're showing advertisements that are like, troublingly close to the content of the mail. Right? So they're reading the mail. So this guy turned this around. Instead of saying Google should not be doing these privacy issues, he said, suppose some two terrorists are making plans using Gmail, supposedly. And then Sergey Brin did not alert the authorities about this. Can you sue Google? Do you understand this? This is putting the whole thing on top of itself. That since you can see, you must see. Okay, and can you hold Google responsible for that? This is an actual scholarly paper that was written, and the current law doesn't completely exculpate Google. Okay, so if you can see it, these are like a good Samaritan laws. If you can do it, you should be able. We should do it. Another question was, do you believe that there will ever be functioning domestic humanoid robots for retail and general population? I believe the answer is pretty much a resounding yes. Roomba, of course, is the very bottom end, and there are variations of Roomba, kinds of things that are already there. But much more. For example, there are now robotic assistants for elderly, because their children are not visiting them. And so the robots come and visit them. And then there are also people worried about whether this is the right thing to do. There's a beautiful talk on TED by Cynthia Brazil, who basically says, she was behind this sort of assistive technology, and now she's worried that this is probably inhuman thing to do. Because she's finding that some of these older people in these nursing homes are essentially taking the robots as if they are humans. Is that the right thing or the wrong thing? At least Cynthia thought that's not the right thing. Okay, but again, there are all sorts of interesting ethical questions that will come up. But the reason those ethical questions are coming up is because the technology is almost there. There are ways in which you can do this. In fact, one of the very earliest AI programs was something called Eliza, which was a chatbot. You guys call it a chatbot. Now, there's a guy called Joe Weizenbaum who wrote this essentially to mostly show how silly us humans are. Okay, he wrote this Eliza as a Freudian psychiatrist. And it turns out that he has this nice stereotypes of Freudian psychiatry, which is mostly repeating what you said with a question mark. And he wrote this program, and he found that his secretary was pouring her heart out to this program. And then he stopped. He basically removed the program from use. Okay, so once again, the assistive robotics is very much possible, but it also brings in all sorts of interesting ethical questions. I do want to mention that when you have those kinds of robotics, it's not going to be Roomba which just does reflexive actions. It will actually need to model the humans in the loop. You need to understand what the human is trying to do so that you can help them. Once again, here is something that I'm sure the dean will know, but none of you will know. There used to be a great show called MASH on the TV, okay? And there was a guy called Radar in MASH. Radar is an amazing guy because before his boss figures out what he needs, Radar knows and gives it to him. So I have written lots of proposals saying I'm going to make Radar and they keep giving me money. Why? Because everybody wants a Radar. Okay, but the Radar was able to do it because he was able to model the beliefs, desires, intentions of his boss. Otherwise, he couldn't have done it. Okay? And then the last one was, could we give AI the feeling of curiosity, leading them to have desires for physical things? Curiosity, yes. It turns out that this whole entire area of reinforcement learning, where there are two issues. This is probably the last deep thing I'll say, and then we can leave. At any given point of time, you have some knowledge. You can use that knowledge to exploit that knowledge to decide what action to do. You can also try to get more knowledge. All you losers here who are going to college have decided that, right? Instead of getting a nice job in McDonald's, you decided to come to college. You decided somehow that increasing your knowledge is helpful. That is always this question. At some point of time, if you continue to be in the college for 25 more years, I'm sure it will start becoming irrational. But right now, I certainly believe, and most of you I'm sure believe, that it's a rational thing to do. Because the optimal decision with an incomplete model of the world can be arbitrarily far from even a suboptimal decision with a more complete model of the world. How do you get more complete model of the world? That's how you do that, by exploration. So rather than just getting to the class, you stop and basically smell roses or look around. What does this 5-day in this college lead to, or what does this particular talk tell me about? And that's all exploration. You showed up here because you are exploring. Okay, and it turns out there's a very nice mathematical way of capturing this exploration versus exploitative trade-offs in reinforcement learning. So this little picture basically is saying, if I don't know at all that these things exist in the world, this is little grid world, I only know these things exist. That's possible, right? I right now know that Barrett's College has 2 buildings, because those are the only 2 buildings I saw just now when I came to do this. Now, if I'm trying to optimize only with this and I need to reach this, I might think this is the best way to go. But if I explore a little, then I might find that this other space exists, and I suddenly can find a more optimal plan. Okay, so curiosity is basically connected to exploration exploitation trade-off, and it very much is doable. That's part of the scenario right now. Now, desires for physical things, that's the whole entire thing. I have no clear answer to that as to a robot wanting a candy. I'm not really sure. I always felt, why can't we evolve to eat pizzas that are faxed? When I was a grad student, faxing was the best thing. Right now, email pizzas, then we will not be carbon-based life forms, right? So maybe the opposite is also going to be possible, but really I don't have a serious answer to whether a robot can desire physical things. Okay, I'll stop there. Those are the questions submitted, and thank you for your patience. And that's it.